A very good evening to everybody who has joined us to follow the agenda for this week. My name is Toiwon Jabela. Tonight on the platform, we are joined by Calle Schlettwein. He's a former Minister of Finance, former Minister of Trade, and also former Minister of Agriculture before he retired in March this year. The minister, or the former minister rather, is joining us to just walk us through his time in government, how he's enjoying his retirement. Perhaps he can inspire others in that regard. Thank you very much, Mr. Schlettwein, for making time. I'm so curious as to just how the past 3 or 4 months have been. Not a government employee, not a state official, not a national leader. If you can walk us through just that first and foremost.
No, thank you very much. I'm grateful that you are still interested in us who are having done our job. But, well, as expected, it was a little bit of an adjustment, and I'm not quite through it. You see, it is difficult to adjust to a situation where you wake up in the morning and you ask yourself, what did you miss yesterday? Or what is it today ahead of you? And you all of a sudden realize, well, there's not much. It's only what you want to do yourself. That is the pleasant part. And I'm getting there now. I have a number of things that I keep myself busy with. But it's good, and it's pleasing to be kind of free. You are not driven or chased by what others want you to do, but you can do what you want to do yourself, and you can say what you want, what you believe is still your right to do, and I enjoy that.
Yeah. Has it always been your plan to leave public office this year, or it was a circumstantial decision?
No, it was not really circumstantial. I had made up my mind that I will stay with the position if wanted till I'm 70. And then I thought that time remaining, if your health permits, I wanted to use for other things while I'm still able to do that. So it was a predetermined decision that I have taken some time. And you will recall at the last Congress I announced already that I will not be anymore available. And I think that is the correct and fair way to do, that you give a lead to your fellows, your comrades, to tell you, I will make space now, so you have some time to adjust also. And I have had then enough time to adjust myself while I was working still for 2.5 years.
Yeah. Does the of course, it's good that you mentioned that this goes as far back as 2022 already, when you announced ahead of the Congress that year that you will no longer be available. Because I was going to ask you whether it is also in a way tied to the fact that, because a lot of people think that you were pretty close to late President Hage Geingob, whose own term rather was going to end this year, whether you didn't feel insulated, if you like, beyond the Geingob term, or did you, in other words, without Geingob, you didn't see yourself surviving the politics of SWAPO, and therefore you just decided to tie your own term in office to that time, or it was really just a matter of time to say, look, once I'm 70 or in 2025, somehow I have to leave?
Well, it's true. I was pretty close to Comrade Hage. And I was actually very proud to be able to be part of his team. But I also wish to remind that I served all three presidents. President Sam Nujoma, who was the founding president, President Pohamba, who brought me into parliament and made me a minister. And my attitude always was that if I'm appointed by a president, my loyalty belongs to him or her. So I'm not having the attitude that I'm tied to a person, and if that person is not there anymore, then I'm also going. No. SWAPO was bigger than presidents. And I thought that it is correct in terms of attitude and in terms of approaches that you give unwavering loyalty to the serving president, who is your appointing authority. And when that term ends, it's the new president's prerogative to pick a team from party members, senior members, or whoever, and that's it. So I was not resigning because I would have been uncomfortable with any other president. But I believe that when you serve, you must be loyal to the one you are serving, and there is very little room to start hunting different loyalties and different approaches while that person is still serving.
Yeah. You know, it's a very rare thing to see a Namibian politician leaving office on their own terms. You know, a lot of people who have exited our politics are people who were not voted back, and somehow they have struggled to make their way back in. So it was you and a few others, I think, Honorable Doreen Sioka, Peter Kachavivi, and a few others who said that enough, you've done your time in office. What does it take for anyone to make such a decision? What kind of life would you have built for yourself to be comfortable enough to exit politics and just go home?
Okay, well, I believe there are two aspects to it. Yeah? And first of all, I believe it's better for oneself to choose the point and time when you want to go, instead of being pushed out or kicked out. Yeah. So if it is your decision, it is a voluntary exit, which is understood by everybody, and everybody consented. But if you are waiting for too long, you may be pushed or just dropped. And then you have very little time to adjust, very little time to get to terms with this new being that you are actually, or the new status that you have. I believe it is important that one self takes that decision and says, I want to go. Here's my notice. Thank you for the opportunity. It creates less bad blood. It creates better consensus. It creates better understanding for both sides.
Absolutely. And in those three ministerial portfolios, I mean, you were a permanent secretary for a long time in the Ministry of Finance, but eventually you became a minister and you served in three different portfolios, trade, finance, and agriculture. I remember you saying at one point, I think when because you took over as finance minister at a very difficult time of our country, and I remember one interview where you said you've never felt so relieved because you just had so much to do with very little. But of all the three, which one would you say was your sort of most enjoyable one between the three?
Well, I must say I enjoyed all three very much. Trade is a very lively, very exciting portfolio. It was at the time when we negotiated the creation of an African free trade area. We had some difficulties in SACU and in SADC. We had many things in trade. the EPA had to be signed, which was a milestone, and so it was very, very exciting, and I enjoyed it very much. The whole drive to get industrialization going was and still is a serious challenge with all these different push-pull factors on the trade agenda, and we see it especially today, again, with tariff resurfacing and globalization being manipulated and pushed and replaced by national interest rather than a common goal, a common betterment for all. So those are challenges that were there then, and they are still here today. Finance, yes, finance was probably the most stressful one, because you had to get around with very little. You are right. We entered that term in a financial crisis which needed to be addressed very urgently, and the plans that we had could not be matched with the tightening of the budget that was very necessary to escape a default. Now, and that was the stressful thing. If you every month must struggle to pay salaries, you can believe the responsibility that rests on you to make sure that all the families, everybody who is responsible and who is entitled to get a salary is indeed getting a salary. And in some cases, even a salary increase. And in other cases, old age pensions need to be increased. So it was difficult and therefore very, very stressful. But I am with some kind of pride saying that we managed the crisis. We actually sacrificed some growth, but were it not for the austerity measures, for the tightening of the system and the cutting away of some irregular practices like tenderpreneuring and so on, our economy would have been in a much, much worse shape. And we wouldn't have been able actually to survive COVID the way we did and to recover after COVID. So I'm very much aware that it cut both ways. There were sacrifices done. People suffered because of what we did, but it was for sure for the common good. And I'm pretty sure that it was very necessary, and it is now starting to bear fruit, because we did not default, we did not become economically unstable, we did not lose economic sovereignty. We were, at the end of my term, still an economy that was only funded by outside funders by about 3.5%. So we brought down the deficit again to that. That was the 4.5%. Sorry, it was 4.5%. So and that's a healthy state. That's what we had promised the people to be, that we do not sacrifice our economic and fiscal sovereignty to other sources that then would dictate what we have to do. We did what we did out of own will and out of necessity.
Yeah. You didn't say much about or anything for now, I suppose, during your
Sorry,
tenure.
I was not with agriculture as yet.
Yes, that's what I was going to say.
Go there.
Yes.
Well, yes, agriculture, water, and land reform. I recall when Comrade Hage asked me to take that portfolio and leave finance. He already also kind of said, well, it's a very important portfolio, because I think he wanted to soften the demotion that would be perceived by the public. And yes, indeed, it was perceived as a demotion. But on the other hand, I then thought for myself, if you are the Minister of Finance, you have to deal with money most of the time. But if you are the Minister of Agriculture, Water and Land Reform, you deal with lives. So I called myself the Minister of Life instead of the Minister of Agriculture, Water and Land Reform, and I must say I enjoyed it. It was great to have this contact with all the different groups, whether it is farmers' unions, whether it is commercial farmers, communal farmers, traditional authorities, and the fact that we could leverage agricultural practices with demand on water resources and land reform and try to do the best with these two resources, that is water and land, for the benefit of our people. I think it was very, very enjoyable. I must say, yes, it was probably the most enjoyable because I also grew up in the water sector, so I could contribute quite well there. So I have no regrets for any of them, but yeah. Finance was the most stressful, trade probably the most exciting, and agriculture the most satisfying, if I can put it like that.
Yeah. Just on that, of course, I mean, as agriculture minister, you had to deal with the issue of the red line. Just for anyone watching, former Minister Schlettwein, what exactly is your position on the red line?
Well, I think we all have to recognize that the red line, and the name says it, is de facto a political line and a very unjust line. It was created by the Germans originally as a veterinary line to curb the further spread of rinderpest. But it was almost immediately used as a political line, a zone that was either well, it was for sure dividing people, because from the moment it was created, people were prohibited to move across the line. It was patrolled by military and police. It was treating people north of the line differently than south. And as I said, migration north or south was prohibited. So it was a political line, and the Germans, I think, had the attitude that their political influence would end at the line. They didn't bother much what happened in the north. So did the South Africans then. They jumped on it and used it as a political line. And yes, from that point of view, it's a divisive line. It created discrimination. It created suffering on both sides, but more so for the north. It created a difference in economic opportunity, whether you are north or south of the line. It, in fact, also created different legal systems where different aspects of law were implemented differently. I think inheritance law, marriage law, ownership of fixed assets, those are all aspects that were treated differently, and that was, I believe, and still is, completely unsustainable. That should be disappearing as quickly as possible. But there is the but, and that is the animal health control that we have to address. And currently the only manner to address the spread of not only foot and mouth, but also lung disease, also rinderpest, also other diseases, is by limiting movement. We saw that during COVID. We were actually, as human beings, contained. We were having red lines around us. You could move not out of the winter municipality or the region or whatever. That is how you prevent diseases from spreading, because you prevent contact of the individuals or the animals that have. And unfortunately, for that purpose, the veterinary cordon fence is still needed. In fact, the country is subdivided in many different sections with many cordon fences that enables us who control animal diseases to contain any outbreak anywhere in the country. from spreading into another part of the country. And that is a practice that is accepted worldwide. The International Animal Health Unit recognizes that cordoning off and compartmentalizing a country to contain, treat, and eradicate diseases in certain areas is the only and best way to fight these type of diseases. Now, therefore, of course, my attitude towards the red line is it must be removed as a red line. The economic opportunities must be equal. Our laws must be equal. We are all Namibians, and the Constitution actually demands from us to be treated equal wherever you are in the country. But we must also recognize that there are animal diseases that must be controlled, and for that we must have a system of containment. We must have a system of vaccination, treating and eradicating diseases that are harmful to our domestic animals, so that our people can make a good living. Mm-hmm. It's not a good practice to, when you have an area in the country which is disease-free and where you can optimize your livestock production, that you sacrifice that just to be as bad as the worst place in the country. It's the other way around that we have to do it. We must make the part where there are animal diseases, we must make them animal disease free. And that's the effort that we have. Of course, we have the difficulty with our neighbors that do not vaccinate, and we have an open border. Our people migrate their cattle from Namibia to Angola, to Zambia, and they pick up diseases there, come back and infest the national herd. So that's why we have a vaccination campaign. And hopefully the plan that we move the fence bit by bit as fast as we can until it reaches the northern border, and with the cooperation of our neighbors to the north, we have a vaccination campaign in the northern neighbors' territory, so that we create buffer zones there, which are now in our own territory. I think that is the plan that we have to implement, and it will be good for all.
Yeah. Just on that point, before we go for a very short break, former minister, the problem is, I mean, I saw that people like Professor Job Mpanda, who challenged this structure in court, you know, they're talking about the dignity of the people, the fact that people are being treated differently. I saw Tobia Upindi, also SWAPO member of parliament, also making similar sentiment. I mean, because for me, it's not very much about the infrastructure that is the fence. It's about the regulations that accompany that structure. Because as a person living from the northern part of the country, I'm told to be patient or not to come with my meat here and feed my children, because I'm bringing potentially infections this side of the country, and therefore risking a market that I don't benefit directly from. I'm asked to put myself on fire in order to make others warm. And that is just, for me, very bad. If it was a temporary measure, I can understand. If it was, we were new in our independence, I can understand. But 35 years later, and there's no timelines of what must happen, when must we move this thing. I mean, other countries say, for example, that you divide the country into zones. If a disease is detected in zone 1, you close off zone 1, and then you rely, the country, the export and domestic consumption relies on the other 3 zones and whatnot. But I mean, what is the plan? What are the timelines?
Yeah, well, up front, I think it is understood that these differences are, but I maintain that it is not a good position to make it cold for everybody when you have some warm places in existence. You should spread the warmth rather than the coldness. and the risk, if you, without the necessary precaution, move the line, then in fact we will lose the market of about 70% of our livestock production. We must make it possible that livestock is produced to make a good living, and that we are having access to the best markets, the best paying markets. Now you're asking about the court case. The court case was merely a case where Professor Amupanda tried to say that what we do by maintaining the red line is unconstitutional, and he is prohibited to take his meat from the north to the south. Now, of course, you know he lost the case. He didn't make a single argument that substantiated that point. And the reason is that, in fact, he can take meat from the north to the south. He must just slaughter it and prepare it in a specific way that it reduces the risk. And secondly, what we are doing is absolutely constitutional. There is no unconstitutional action. It is all mandated by law through Parliament. So it is mandated. We were mandated by the people to do it. So I think the only argument that one must have sympathy for is your argument that there is differences, and that needs to be addressed as quickly as possible. I agree. We were slow. But I want to recall also that 2015, we wanted to move to declare certain large areas in the north that were the buffer zone. We wanted to declare them disease-free. But then we had a foot-and-mouth outbreak. And the reason for that foot-and-mouth outbreak was returning cattle from southern Angola back into Namibia with the disease. And there was an outbreak, which from an animal health control point of view, shattered that plan. So we are slow, yes, but we were almost there, and then we were thrown back because an outbreak that we did not really anticipate, and that was very unfortunate. So your argument to set timelines and to create a situation which has a similar or an equal economic setup, equal laws, equal rights, is very much needed, if that would be the consequence. But I don't think it has to be the consequence. It should be just a veterinary control act that is mandating us to control disease. We are doing that by having commodity-based trade, so we have access for that market. Now, it is not the best paying market, but it is quite good markets that we can access. And we must have internal measures that we equalize the price for everybody. Every farmer must get the same price for his cattle in the country. It cannot be differentiated. And those are matters that need to be addressed very urgently.
Yeah. We go for a very short break and return with former Minister Calle Schlettwein.
Missed the madness? Catch every sharp jab, unfiltered truth, and political punchline from Second Take, the show that says what others won't. From presidential bloopers to policy absurdities, we satirize the powerful and poke the pompous. If you didn't catch the fire live, don't sweat it. Every single story is waiting for you on Echo. Find us at 102.com and Echo, in your time, on your terms.
We continue the very interesting and exciting conversation with former Minister Calle Schlettwein. Now, former Minister, at the very beginning of our conversation, you mentioned something quite important, that with your retirement also comes a sense of freedom to say what you say, to say what you want to say. I know that there was a time when you, I think it was you, because you are an avid social media user, I think it was you and former Minister Thomas Luendo that expressed some views about Fishrot at the time. And then we got subsequent media reports suggesting that you sort of landed in trouble with those views. What can you tell us? What can you recall from that episode?
Well, I stand absolutely by what I said, that Fishrot is one of those examples where multimedia or multinational parties exploit a small economy with the help of some well-connected politicians for their own gain. And that is corruption. That is bad. That damages the whole. One cannot condone that. Now that view is I think correct, and the fact that we were in trouble for that opinion can be interpreted in many ways. Why is that a correct stance is all of a sudden perceived as a threat or perceived as something that shouldn't have been done? I believe or I was disappointed by that, actually. I thought if you, as a collective, take a stance against corruption, such an opinion that that myself and Comrade Tom uttered would have been welcomed instead of used to land ourselves in trouble. So it's one of these things where collective attitudes go in a direction where one cannot support them anymore. Now, what happened after that is we were requested not to voice such opinions in public unless they were condoned or are discussed in cabinet. Now, of course, in a collective system, one has to appreciate that, and we try to adhere to it. But the fact that we were correct, I cannot retreat from that. I think it was very correct, and it is also sometimes necessary to say some things that are uncomfortable, because it is not only our responsibility as leaders to do what the top leadership wants us to do, because the party is bigger than the president. We sing SWAPO is the people and the people is SWAPO. We never sing SWAPO is the president and the president is SWAPO. No, we don't sing that. So it is important that one voices and you make your views known, even if it is uncomfortable for some.
Yeah, I mean, what was interesting is exactly what you are saying, that you did not even contradict the common position. If the common position is that we oppose corruption as a government or as a party, and then you simply expand on that. In fact, you just reiterated that point, and somehow it created the commotion that it did. But is that also, I mean, when we talk about the collective voice, I mean, you are a very open-minded man. Even during your time in government, you've always been a man that spoke his mind. But if speaking in your mind is aligned with the government position on that issue, it shouldn't be creating problems for you.
Yeah, no, I agree. It shouldn't, but it did. It did. And I think it was, of course, in a precarious time where we were just before an election. It was, of course, also used to influence the outcome of the election, and I think that is why there were very large sensitivities around. And it's to a certain extent understood why one wants to have a stable boat not rocked at that point in time.
Yeah.
But if it is a fundamental issue where the people are robbed of things for the advancement of individuals that are part of the collective, then I think it is not compromisable. And my analysis is still the same. It should have been helpful to make these comments instead of perceived as not being helpful, unless there are reasons we are not aware of that threatened some. So to live in a collective is, of course, a environment where you are always and continuously forced to make compromises. You can say your say in cabinet, you can say your say behind doors, and you can try to convince everybody that your point is taken. But if it is not taken, and if it is another direction convinces the majority in these gremia, then so be it. Then you must defend that. That is correct. But as soon as it becomes irregular, then you cannot remain within the common and collective. Then you must make your point clear.
Yeah. One of the things also that you held a different position from many others in the party was on the same-sex issue. There were reports sometimes back that you simply did not support the fact that this position that people must be sort of, I don't know, maybe demonized or denied certain rights. So what was your position on this issue? Or what is it to this day?
Well, I basically, it's a very contentious issue. It is very sensitive, but my principal view is if your choice of intimacy is cause of being discriminated against, then that would be principally wrong. So if you agree with that way of showing your intimacy and being close to another human being, now that is of course another question. But we should be very much aware of the fact that our society came out of apartheid. We were in a society where we were prohibited to be intimate with blacks, we whites. There was an Immorality Act. We fought that. It was wrong. Why could I, as an equal human being, not be intimate and make love with a black person? So I thought, in a way, we in SWAPO had agreed in principle to the position that you cannot make a legal difference between human beings on the strength of where they want and how they want to make their intimacy known, as long as it is not harmful for anyone. You know, pedophiles and things are not included here. So that is the principal position. The second issue is, of course, that if we start to, instead of being and remaining inclusive, saying everyone is equal, if we start to isolate certain population groups in our society and say, well, no, they are different and there must be different laws for it, we are regressive. We are going back to the apartheid system that we actually fought on very strong grounds and on a very high moral ground. I believe we stood when we fought against the oppressors that created these laws. And I was therefore, and I'm still very much convinced it is a wrong approach. Whether you like the practice or not, you should have the choice to then avoid it, not do it. But don't put it in a law, don't discriminate against these people if they do not create harm to others.
Yeah. During your many years in government, Mr. Schlettwein, what do you make of racial relations in the country? What is the place of a white man in Namibia today, given the history of our country? I mean, you are a German-speaking Namibian. Germany caused unspeakable harm to our country. The reparations are not paid to this day, and what has been proposed is has been described as an insult by the affected communities. But without going into that subject for now, do you feel that there's acceptance from both sides that we are all Namibians now? Or do you, for example, feel like some South African white people say, oh, there are now BEE laws that have been put in place and they are discriminatory against white people? I mean, to the extent that people even reported President Ramaphosa in South Africa to Donald Trump about these things. How do we deal with the very bitter past of our country?
Okay, yeah, well, that's a question that comes up often. And let me start at the beginning. When I was very young, and it was in the early 80s, I personally took a decision that the white regime that oppresses blacks is wrong and not justifiable, and I left it. I joined SWAPO and said, well, I want to join the struggle to get rid of that system. And I'm really grateful that I was completely embraced by my comrades. Most of them black. There were a few whites, of course, that were of similar opinion, and we all had the same experience. We were totally and fully absorbed in the party, in the community, in the struggle, and later in government. I never felt left out. In fact, I always felt that I'm very much part and parcel of the party, and its drive for first liberation and then development, economic justice, and a good life for all. So much so that I was called by the founding president, Comrade Sam Joma, to be the secretary of the Politburo and the Central Committee since 1994. I have maintained that position. I was the secretary of all political committee meetings, Central Committee meetings, congresses until 2010. And I never felt that I was attacked because of my skin color. I was fully embraced as a comrade and as an equal. Now, that is me. If you ask what are the relationships between whites and blacks in the country, I do not believe that all have that fortune, that they are fully embracing each other. I think there are sometimes really unfortunate, very harsh racial barriers still in existence, and we all should fight them. I believe we are a country where we did very well. You know, we understand each other. When we are on the streets, we are kind of Namibians. No? But tribalism has crept in. We are often, and in my taste, far too often, putting the tribal origin and tribal loyalties before national and unity goals. And I think that is divisive. I believe we make a mistake if we do that, and we will not advance as a unitary state where everyone has equal rights if we follow that road. We also well, you asked about the legislation, affirmative action, and so on. I think that's correct. By the way, I was the permanent secretary in the Ministry of Labour when we created the Affirmative Action in Employment Act. So I was very proud when I could present that to my minister, and it was approved in Parliament. because it is a very, very necessary tool. If you want to correct and equalize a society that suffered oppression and discrimination for more than 100 years, and you do not utilize the state's legal power to do that, you will not get equality. And I think inequality is still our big problem economically. We have not made enough inroads to equalize incomes, to equalize economic opportunities, and to equalize wealth standards in our country. That's our big problem. And instead of fighting these kind of acts, I think we did probably too little to bring about equality. It is our main challenge to look for enemies and blame them for being the reason for that. I think after 35 years, that is an hollow argument. You must look at yourself. What did you do to make equality come? And not why it was created in the original time. So I think that is where we sometimes miss the boat, that we look for enemies instead of solutions that we can attain together to bring about equality.
Yeah. The last topic that I want to engage you in briefly before we come to the conclusion of our conversation is the challenge around land. As Minister of Agriculture, land reform also fell on your desk lately in the last term, when the ministries, of course, were conglomerated. But in your experience during those years that you were presiding, what seems to be the direction of land reform in the country? Are we winning? With this, a lot of land that is being bought by government, and then you hear that all these big elites of government and SOEs have now occupied some of these resettlement farms. So it doesn't really shake the balance, the skewed imbalance of land ownership in the country.
Yeah, well, if I look at the situation, I looked at it at the beginning of my term as the Minister of Agriculture, Water and Land Reform. One has to realize, or I realized, two major drawbacks. The first one was we politically said and promised that land reform is important and it must be speedily implemented. But we never resourced the land reform process enough that we could do that, actually. So we promised something and then we set ourselves up to fail by not resourcing it. That's the first point. The second point, the land reform process and the resettlement process that was followed, I believe is correct in a way where it says land reform must favor blacks to regain their dignity, to gain their livelihoods that they made off the land, which was robbed from them. That's correct. That discrimination is absolutely justified, and actually it is a must if we want to have a just society. We must go ahead and undo and correct the injustices that were done in the past. And of course the German genocide is the worst of them all. If you want to rank injustices that were imposed on Namibians. So we must go ahead. Now, how can we improve the situation? What we did do during our term, and I think it was started in the previous term, is to have a relook at the resettlement policy. My attitude there was to correct the land disparities. You must install ownership, not a relationship between a landlord and a lessee. So I think the resettlement policy kind of fell short of creating a economic asset that was lost and bring that back to those who lost it. So in the new policy, we have that now possible. But what I also realized, and you mentioned it, is there's not much productivity on the land. A lot of the land is going to waste from a productive point of view. It was treated as a political issue and not so much as an economic issue where we have to ensure productivity. Now, the new resettlement policy puts that as an important priority, that we must ensure that the land that we give, first as a leasehold to be resettled beneficiaries, must be productive. And now the new policy says if you do well, you have a chance to become the owner of the land. You will have the chance to be the title holder of that land. If you are not doing well, you will get a grace period where you can try again. But if you fail again, then you run the risk of losing that lease because there are many other people that want the land. So I think the performance element in the lease contracts that entitles you to get a freehold title on the land if you do well, or there is a method where you run the risk of losing the land if you are not productive is correct. Now, the third aspect that you mentioned is it appears that wealthy people get more access to land than poor people. The policy doesn't say that. The policy say actually there are no fees to be paid for any land for resettlement. I believe there is evidence that there are payments made to some people to become the beneficiary in the land process. That is the only explanation that I have for the disparity between wealthy people getting land vis-a-vis poor people that get land. That's the allegation that is there. We looked at the statistics. It's not very prominent because we couldn't find a extreme sharp disparity between rich and poor being resettled. There are many poor people being resettled, but there is a disparity between those that earn a salary that get land and those that don't have a salary at all get land. So there are disparities. So ability to pay appears to be a determining factor whether you get land or not. And that is in a situation where you don't have to pay anything. So I believe there is a desperate need to get in, to improve the transparency and accountability of resettlement committees in the region, how they allot and how they decide who the beneficiaries are and not. And we tried to address that in the policy as well by layering it and making it not a one committee decision only, but a range of decisions that have to be taken collectively by representatives of the region and national representatives. So to avoid that possibility that you are rewarded with land if you pay for that allotment.
Honorable Calle Schlettwein, thank you very much for your time. Really, we appreciate your input. It gives us great insights into not only your thinking, but I think a lot of us can learn a thing or two from a very important conversation that we've had. Thank you for your time.
It was a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me. And we live in a country that we call our home. It's our only home, so let's make it better. And always think of being inclusive, just, and equal in your actions. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. That's Calle Schlettwein. He's a former cabinet minister in the Namibian government, speaking to us from his retirement base about, first and foremost, how he's enjoying that new live, but also sharing perspectives on very important national topics. Thank you for watching.